The Marvels, General Orders World War II, and Davy Jones Locker, The Kraken Wakes. This is Staying In.
So, Sam.
Hello.
You had Canarian potatoes when we last spoke. You'd had them.
Yeah.
You waxed lyrical about them.
Yeah.
I think this has been the year of the potato. We've had the hash brown chips.
Yeah.
I have just had a type of potato I've never had before.
Oh.
And it's not one that is common.
I was going to say, please don't say jacket or new.
No, I had jacket potatoes as a baby.
This Maris Piper, I think
Maris
it's called?
Pippa?
My wife will only eat Vivaldi potatoes from Sainsbury's, and it's an issue.
Have you tried to sneak in a Maris Piper and just see if she finds out?
And she notices. She notices.
In a plate of roast potatoes, there's one.
Because I point to, right, here's a kilo of potatoes down here for £2, or we can buy 4 Vivaldis for £1.93. What? Vivaldi? Oh, right, okay.
I suppose they're basically like the potato equivalent of pink ladies, aren't they?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. So this isn't like what do you call it? A breed of potato or a species of potato? It's more
breed of potato.
That is really, really disturbing. Let's just forget that.
Sorry, I'm going to go a bit deeper on this. You go to a farm, and the farmer's just got 2 potatoes alone in a greenhouse.
Have you not met potato breeders?
we just leave them be. We're just hoping they make a new potato.
That's it. It's vegetable husbandry.
Yeah. Jesus.
It's a way in which potato is cooked.
All right, like Canarian potato, yeah.
So yours was salt baked, weren't they, Sam?
Yeah,
That's
salt
correct.
baked with Mojo sauce.
With Mo and Joe together, Mojo sauce, courtesy of Lanzarote. So this is a new way I've never had potatoes like this before.
Did you have to cut them?
No, these weren't cut.
Okay, so whole potatoes.
Did you make it or you served it?
My partner made this.
Was it an accident?
No, intentional.
I mean, I'm at a loss to think of a new way to eat a potato, but
exactly. As was I, Sam. But I found out today that 2 + 2 can equal 5.
Did you have Hasselbacks?
No, I've made Hasselbacks a few times. No, it wasn't Hasselbacks.
Was it like a spiral?
No, these weren't spiralised. These were Danish potatoes that were caramelised.
Oh my!
It's like a toffee potato.
Basically, yes, Dan. Almost like a toffee apple, but a toffee potato, but not that rock solid, like warm, so that the caramel is actually, like a glaze almost.
And did you have them with something, or is it just?
Yes, we did. We had them with apples and onions.
Oh, quite okay.
Which are being kind of like fried together, and with pork on the top, a pork loin on the top of that, and these potatoes on the side.
Okay.
Can I ask how were they? What's the display method? Are they chopped into cubes? Are they sliced? Are we talking roast potato chunkies or what?
These are like your baby potatoes.
Okay.
Just in a pan and a lovely caramel. And it was extraordinary, and it was an assault on the senses. It really, really was. I mean, I didn't know what I was going to expect from Danish cuisine. I mean, apparently they don't have these potatoes every night of the week. These are for like Christmas and stuff.
Well, yeah, obviously.
Yeah, you'd assume, wouldn't you?
It's not like they go to pull up the Danish McDonald's. It's like, what dip do you want with your chips? Do you want ketchup? Do you want mayonnaise? Or do you want Twix caramel?
Yeah, Twix caramel.
Have I ever told you guys about the most decadent potatoes I ever saw on a cooking show once?
I mean, thankfully your wife didn't see them, because that could have been a game changer.
It was
no, you didn't. So hang on. So you watched a few. Was this MasterChef? Because I know you.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't MasterChef. It was like Sunday Morning with what's his name, Martin. Someone.
James Martin.
James Martin. There we go.
As opposed to like Martin Clunes or Martin Sheen.
Martin Sheen.
Martin Lewis.
Martin Short. And there was he had a chef mate on, and he said, "Right, I'm going to make now the most the ultimate roast potato. And I was like, come on, like, we all know the tricks, mate. You know, you parboil, you rustle them up in your pan, really hot duck fat, oil, get them so you get the outside really crispy and the inside really fluffy. We all know how to make a good roast potato, whatever. But he took it one step further, and I was not prepared for what he did to this potato, and I'm still unsure about it.
What are you imagining? Dan, what are you envisaging now? Sam's teed this up. How do you go even more than that?
I mean, I think he's already teed up the fact that there's only so much you can do with a roast potato. So I'm imagining more kind of just like theatre around it. It's like there's a group of people coming on serenading him as he's tossing salt on top of the potatoes.
I mean, decadent for me. When you think of decadence and food, I'm thinking like saffron.
I'm thinking truffle,
thinking caviar, truffle oil. Yes.
No, I'm thinking shaved truffles.
I mean, you're both wrong. So what he did was, he made roast potatoes the way that I've just described, and then just before they were finishing cooking, he took them out of the oven, waited for them to cool down, opened them up, removed the potato from inside, mashed that potato with butter, cream, sugar, milk. Then put that potato back inside the roast potato and then finished off the cooking. So it was like a roast potato, but with a fluffy mashed potato, creamed mashed potato interior.
He must be hell to live with, with the kids and stuff. Yeah, just roast potatoes. No, you don't have to do that, Gary.
You don't have to open up every single one of them. We're cooking for 14.
There we go.
When my students arrive in first year, a lot of them have never really cooked before for themselves. So one of the first things I get them to do is to swap a meal with everyone around the room. So they leave having like a week's worth of meals and not just the same meal each day. What was your go-to signature dish at university?
At university, it was tuna. It was pasta. It was cheese. It was sweet corn. Swirl it all up. And then a packet of discos.
Well, I think in my first year, actually no, so in my second and third year, I would actually be quite similar, like tuna pasta, cucumber, tuna mayonnaise, cucumber, all mixed up, and you could just do a big batch of that, and yummy, yummy, yummy. First year, it would have been something like super noodles. Like I would have just had like a cupboard full. Like my parents would used to come up every couple of months, and they would bring a box of like, because they obviously just assumed I wasn't eating, even though I was. But in my halls, there was a kind of a restaurant, and I used the term restaurant in the loosest possible sense. But that's what they called it.
Yeah.
But yeah, they come with like a box full of super noodles and cup of soups and anything that can be made with a kettle in your room.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
Gosh. Mine was probably something pasta related. I think like you, Dan, for the first term, I had super noodles, but I think I lost about a stone in weight because they were kind of just air. Basically, those things are.
I do distinctly remember, and this is how much at the time I felt it was a low point. I distinctly remember one night for dinner, I literally just had a bowl of beans because I didn't have anything else. I just had a tin of beans, so I poured the entire tin of beans into a bowl and put it in the microwave because we're on halls at this point. And yeah, right. I just had a bowl of beans, and at that point I was like, I know this isn't good. I know,
right, Chris,
waiting for the aid package from your parents.
Chris, now I think I don't know why I've deemed this important, but I feel like it's a small point which will determine really how low Dan got. Was he eating those beans with a fork or a spoon? Because one is slightly refined and one is kind of like really just giving up and just eating them like cereal.
Or a wooden spoon.
Well, I definitely used a utensil. I wasn't kind of like sipping it.
Oh, good Lord.
I don't remember if it was a fork or a spoon.
His tub of beans.
But I also know in your accommodation, Dan, you didn't really have much in the way of a kitchen, if memory serves me
We
correct.
did not know.
So I think that, no. And I also know that your accommodation was, and I heard this, modelled on a Swedish prison.
Yeah.
So, at the time of recording, it's Christmas Eve.
It is. Merry
is.
Christmas Eve, everyone.
Now, it's Christmas Eve, and Sam and I, you and I managed to kind of meet up.
Well, yeah, like all of us. Well, not like all of us. For some reason, you're a very, very difficult man to pin down, and I tried my best to book you in at a time close to your birthday. Wasn't possible. So, I booked you in a couple of weeks ago.
Here we are. Yes, which was great. I got to hang out with you and your son
for a play sesh. Yeah,
which was lovely as always.
Mm-hmm.
Did a little trip to the bakery. Oh, it was so funny, Dan. We went to the bakery with Sam's wife and son. All of us got something from the bakery apart from Sam. He walked 10 metres out of the bakery and he just stopped. And his wife knew straight away, you want to go and get something, don't you? No, it'll be all right. Right. I'll have something when I get back home. And he could see me, my, Santa Claus with jam in it. This nice sort of smiley face. And moped on his way home. But we managed to play some games together. It was really, really nice. I was particularly excited because I managed to get to the table a game that I backed on Kickstarter a year ago that arrived, thankfully, a cooperative pirate game. I love cooperative games. As we know, listener, I love pirate games. Yes, I love all things piratical apart from, illegally downloading stuff.
Yes.
And this is Davy Jones Locker, The Kraken Wakes by Zach and Katie Jacob. But it's important to note Katie Jacob, whose name doesn't appear on the BGG page.
Oh.
And their publisher, PudKat Games, that's the name of the company. And essentially, Dan, the game is this. You're building a team to kill a monster, which is a kraken. And you can do that with a player count of 1 to 5. And yes, there is a large kraken terrorising the high seas, and we as players have, with our respective ships, have to tool up and take down this monster. And Sam said something that was really poignant when we started playing. Well, actually, no, it was about halfway through.
Did I?
You looked up to me and you said, actually, you didn't look up to me, although I do think you do look up to me. You looked over to me and you said, this is the Jaws board game that Pete wanted.
Yeah.
And that is, I think in a nutshell, that's what it is. Now, Jaws is a game by Ravensburger, designed by Prospero Hall. It's a design that we love. I love Jaws. Yeah. Pete gave me the copy after playing it once. He said he didn't like it. And similarly, you're on the hunt for a monster. And similarly to Davy Jones Locker, The Kraken Wakes, it's played over 2 acts. And each of those acts takes place on one side of the board. And both games start off with something a bit more expansive. So in the case of Jaws, the shark is in the sea and you're trying to run around the island saving people on the beaches whilst trying to depower the shark somewhat. In this case, in Davy Jones Locker, you're trying to, over 6 rounds, which is a problem, but still, with limited time, you have to travel across the board, exploring islands, visiting the markets. And each of these 4 islands favours a particular stat that you have on your player board. And those stats are sailing, i.e. how far you can move across the board per action, attacking, how many dice you can roll to attack, hull, how many dice you can roll to defend, and repair, which is how good you are at being able to repair your ship when it gets damaged, and lastly, integrity, which is your life. And then on the second half, you flip the board over, and then the Kraken appears, and it's these nice little chunky miniatures with tentacles and everything, and you have to take down the Kraken. That's the game in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm.
It's essentially a video game boss battle in Act 2.
Yeah.
Where
it's very much like a video game boss battle in a sense, because the first half of the game is a bit like, when you wander into a room and there's suddenly lots of ammo and health, and you're just like, oh no.
Yeah, kill room. Yeah.
And like this is preparing me for something I do not feel prepared for, and then suddenly you walk through a door, you cross over a threshold, and it's a big boss.
A gate closes behind you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it is a literal game of 2 halves. But like that boss battle thing where you've got these tentacles in the water that can follow your ships around the board, you could go straight for the head and start attacking that. But if you take out the tentacles, that depowers the Kraken. So it's weaker, it's more vulnerable to attacks. And there's that kind of sweet spot. Like if I go too close to the centre of this maelstrom, this whirlpool, am I going to be able to get out of it before the Kraken attacks me? And it's quite lean, it's quite mean. I think we both agreed, Sam, that we'd have preferred the first act to be a bit longer.
Yeah.
Because I think you quite enjoyed that kind of Merchants and Marauders-esque sandbox type game.
Yeah, I think the first half, but I don't know, because the first half and the second half sort of inform each other. I think I only sort of missed the first half, or thought it was a bit too short, because I enjoyed it quite a lot. And then once we got into Battle in the Kraken, I was enjoying that too. And actually, I think that if we played it again, I think I'd get a lot more out of the game, because I felt like the first half felt a bit too short, because I thought I was going to be underpowered for when the Kraken came up. But actually, we put up a really decent fight between the two of us.
We did.
So I think that in future playthroughs, I'll be a bit more prepared for it. I think that this game sort of is a very, very typical Kickstarter game. It comes in a very, very heavy box. There's lots of plastic Kraken pieces. There's a dice for everything. It's not just cardboard coins. They're solid gold, not solid gold, but they're solid. So it all feels a little bit unnecessary at times. And I think that where the first half sort of falls down, and where I felt like I kind of wanted it to be in it a little bit longer, is I think the first half will be different every time you play it. And because there are just so many random elements that can happen during the first half, there's a bit of randomization in terms of events that occur. There's randomization in terms of cards you pull from the market, or things that you find when you explore. And so because of that, I think that I just wanted to see a bit more of what the first half was going to offer in terms of those experiences. I mean, like, you had like pirate ships, and you had like Navy vessels that apparently were going to come and take us down, and we just encountered none of them. None of them ever came out onto the board.
Yeah, because there is this deck of cards called the Open Seas, Open Waters deck, where essentially, Dan, any time you move across open sea, you have to draw one of these cards. And it's quite a sizable deck. And the beautiful thing about that is replayability. So there was stuff that I encountered in my game with Sam that I'd not encountered before. And it was great because I had these pieces in the box. I think, what do these pieces do? And suddenly, oh my gosh, it's this.
Yeah. But what that meant for us is that we just went from shop to shop, tooling up, and then the Kraken came out.
And do you think that the shortness of that, because obviously, although it sounds like it's a very kind of 50-50 game, the setup, the boss battle doesn't sound like a very long game. So it doesn't strike me as narrative being a big thing. But do you think because of that first half being short, because the concept feels very narratively driven kind of thing. The idea of being able to set up, and you're going up against this big monster, this mythical beast, all this stuff. You can imagine lots of kind of world building that could be happening. And I don't mean that in a sense of like it's a 7-hour game or something like that, but I just mean there's a lot more you could do with that. And do you think if that period of, because you say like 6 rounds, if that was longer, would that have enabled you to have just really invested a bit more into that narrative, and would have then obviously made the second half much more impactful because there are stakes, so to speak?
But then it's a difficult balance, because if the first act was slightly longer, you might get too powerful, and then the second act isn't as fun because you just breeze over the Kraken and it's not a challenge. The Kraken's got to be a challenge. So I understand the way it is. You're sort of rolling the dice on whether you're going to get a very, very exciting game, or you're going to get a very sort of not average, but a very, very good game.
But there are 2 things I really loved in this game that I've not seen before, really. And it made me feel that I really enjoyed this kind of cooperative experience. One was in Act 1, one was in Act 2. So in Act 1, Sam's already alluded to it, searching for treasure. What's quite lovely about this, Dan, is that there's an option. You can either go for a shipwreck, and there's 2 shipwrecks on the board, or you can kind of go hunting for treasure. But in both instances, what happens is that one player can't do this alone. Another player has to do this with them. And that other player has to be within 4 spaces of you. And what happens is, and it feels almost like an RPG, one person dives down to the wreck and the other person's there to support them. And then if you succeed, you decide how to split the loot between you. And it generally feels quite nice and collaborative. We've done this adventure. The second thing I really loved, and it was in Act 2, was, and I know it's a big bugbear of Sam, it's a bugbear of many people, is player elimination. Because in Act 1, your ship can't sink. But Act 2, what happens is, and this happened to us, so I felt I was the more powerful ship, but my ship sank, and it caught me off guard. The Kraken took me out, and I sank. And I can swim towards Sam as actions, or Sam can come to me, but when I get on his ship, what happens is I flip my player board, and I have a map of a ship, and that's now Sam's ship. So while Sam is moving around the board, thinking of the bigger picture, chasing down the Kraken and its tentacles, and doing his typical actions, I'm on his ship, asking him, okay, what do you need more stuff? Like Scotty in the Enterprise. And I'm rolling dice now to move, or using my actions, to move across this model of the ship to support him in areas such as sailing, bolstering his ship because he's about to take a massive bit of damage, or increasing his firepower of cannons. And I have to make that. I've got this really interesting puzzle of those choices I make now. And I feel like I'm doing something. It still feels cooperative. And I don't feel like I'm alienated or out of the game. And I really, really like that experience. That was probably my favourite bit.
That sounds really interesting. And it seems that it's a very fine balance it would have to walk, but both parts of the game feel like they could be longer. Because I can imagine that second half with the Kraken being a situation where, if what you're saying happens there, where your ship has been sank and you then move on to the other ship, that's a really lovely evolution of the gameplay as it goes on. And obviously, if you are able to kill the Kraken too soon, you don't get that. I think also, as you're kind of talking, I'm imagining kind of the 4 of us playing it, or just kind of a large amount of people playing it. And I can absolutely see how the kind of the fun and the narrative elements would come into it, where one of us feels like a maverick and wants to go straight for the front, probably Pete wants to go straight in there, while the others are kind of like, oh, he's off again, and then his ship gets sank and he has to retreat, kind of tail between his legs. And I can really see that working really quite well. I do think from what I've seen, it's a very simple effect, but the idea of the pieces of the tentacles coming out at different points on the map is a really lovely visual of that, and kind of like having kind of the Kraken in the center, and then at various different kind of hexagonal kind of spaces having these different tentacles coming up really gives that idea. And I'm guessing they kind of move as the game progresses, so you have that feeling of movement from that, and constantly you're having to move, you're having to adapt and all that stuff. And it sounds to me that I think the whole game just needs a little bit of space to breathe, by the sounds of it. I think whether or not what you can do to kind of get the battle with the Kraken a little bit longer without it becoming repetitive, as I say, that's a very, very fine line to walk. You want to push it as long as you can before it being, okay, we need to do this bit again and then this bit again, just to allow those narrative elements, those bits where you're on different people's ships, that whole thing of you trying to tactically outmaneuver this beast. And when that becomes a big thing, that's also then supported by this enhanced earlier phase. It kind of maybe feels like a first version of the game that then needs almost not so much a legacy edition, but like an enhancer, like let's throw a load of kind of add-ons onto it that really actually makes it sing.
It's interesting because, like, based on what Sam was saying there, it's the same reaction I had when I first played Above and Below, that Ryan Locker game you very kindly bought me, where there are these lovely bits of story on the cards, and I always felt the game ends too soon. But the beautiful thing about that is it means you're going to play it more because there's more of the story all the time for you to kind of discover. Like, there's little bits of I like the fact still there are cards I've still not encountered yet. There are open sea cards I've still not flipped yet. There's new surprises for me still yet to discover in this game. And it clocks in, I think, at about a lean 90 minutes, which if you compare that to, say, Merchants and Marauders, which I think we spoke about in episode 151 of the pod, which is a bit more of a relaxed an enjoyable kind of experience, but it doesn't have that narrative kind of push of, okay, we're teaming up together to take down this monster.
And it's also it's strange how attached you get to your ship and how quickly personal you feel about it and what it's capable of, and the people that you hire in the first half as well. And so, you know, I take what you're saying, Dan, and I think you got a point in terms of, you know, if the fight with the Kraken is one, you know, is one of many and stretched over a certain period of time, and you've got a bit more time to go away, lick your wounds, build something a bit better, and then come back and fight it again. I think there's definitely capacity for this kind of game to reach into those spaces narratively, because there's enough in here, and a part of me thinks it's to its detriment, the amount of stuff that's in this box. But I think part of it is also a massive boon to it as well, because of how different every game could turn out being. I mean, we've spoken about how difficult Kris is to pin down. He's such a social butterfly. I mean, he's I don't know if this is the forum to bring this up, but Danny stopped inviting me to go and watch Marvel movies with him. Yeah.
Oh, Christopher.
Don't get the invites anymore.
You've been through so much together.
I did say that I'd happily watch the film with you, Sam. But,
again. You know, not the first time. You know.
No, I'm. Do you know what I was literally thinking about this the other day? One of my big regrets in life, and it's a lovely thing to be at this stage where this is one of my big regrets in life, is not seeing Endgame with you, Sam.
Wow.
Genuinely, that regret will, I think it's fair to say, haunt me.
I'd go to the cinema with you, Sam.
Thanks.
When we were in London, we paid about 70 quid to go watch the first Hobbit film in
we did
100 whatever frames per second in London. Yep.
No, but like, yeah, and also I miss the Griff, Sam. You know,
yes.
I really do.
Yeah.
Now I know what you're alluding to here. You're alluding to the new hotness. Is hotness the right word?
No.
I think it's a hot film, but the rest of the world doesn't seem to.
No.
Looking at its box office takings, this is the Marvels. Now, I think context is needed. If you've been living in a cave for the past year and a half, Marvel's not popular anymore, it seems. It's become a bit of a stinker for many. In part, this is well placed. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. In other areas, I think it's just become quite fashionable to put the boot in just for the sake of putting the boot in. I think there has been a noticeable dip on average on the quality of Marvel properties. Yeah. Dan, you've seen this as well. The Marvels. This is coming from a new director. Brie Larson reprises their role, as does Tiona Paris and Lana Villani, who we've spoken about beforehand, with their respective Disney Plus TV series.
Yes, So I saw that. I had like a random Friday night where I didn't have to look after the kids and stuff, and I was like, I might just go to the cinema. And I'd not planned on going to the cinema. I looked and the Marvels was out that day. I was like, all right, I'll do this. I'd seen a trailer for it just a few days prior, and the trailers had looked fine, but the trailer I'd seen was the final trailer, and it opens with slow motion black and white of Tony Stark's final moments in Endgame, and Captain America standing with his shield, and Thanos saying, "I am inevitable," and I'm thinking, oh, Marvel, you're not confident about this.
We're still dying
You're
out.
going back to the well here. This is a bad sign that you aren't confident. And the trailer goes through kind of get ready for the moment that changes everything. And I'm like, me watching thinking, there's not going to be a moment that changes everything. But I'm kind of intrigued about what you're trying to sell as being the moment that changes everything. And I'm kind of curious as to is there a reason why you're kind of pulling up these kind of the high point of the Marvel Cinematic Universe in this? Spoilers, there's nothing to do with Iron Man, Captain America, Thanos. that's just purely for the trailers to try and get people hooked. And I would never want anyone to go in there thinking that that's the case.
Sure.
But so I kind of went into it. I was kind of curious, kind of a bit of morbid curiosity, because I've kind of been up and down with it. Like I said right from the off, at the end of what's referred to as the Infinity Saga, I was kind of wanting to get off the train. And then I realised, well, we talk about it on the podcast, so maybe I should stay on the train a little bit longer. So I've kind of just rented a ticket every now and again. And I've liked some of the TV shows. I think generally they've been good fun without being kind of world-changing. I think some of the movies, Eternals, have been god-awful.
Oh, Dan.
I know we're very different. I know we have different views, but this is the hill I'm willing to die on.
But I think Dan's gonna win out on this, because I could bet a fair amount of money that we are never seeing the Eternals ever again.
Sadly. Yeah.
But I think there have been some, like, there's been a few kind of little flickers, like obviously something like Spider-Man, No Way Home and all that stuff.
Shang-Chi
was good without reaching the heights, but it was good. It was kind of like, okay, it's a good introduction. I'm happy to see more of the character.
It felt like an Iron Man, or it felt like Captain America. Like, not a great Marvel movie, but a great character.
Yeah, it's a good. I can see this has got somewhere it can go.
Yeah.
So this kind of feeds up, and we kind of build up with following WandaVision, which introduced the kind of the adult Monica Rambeau, and we had Miss Marvel, which introduced Kamala Khan, and this is kind of the first time in this kind of second saga, the multiverse saga, where we've had these TV characters properly making their step up. We've had bits and pieces, but properly making like a proper step up from their TV up to the film. And I think by and large, that's pretty successful. I think they're good characters. I think they work well. I think Tiana Paris is usually pretty great. I think for me, kind of Iman Vellani steals the show. Like every time she's on screen, I have fun. And I think I was trying to think of it afterwards, and like for me, it's just a fun Marvel film. And I've not had a lot of fun with the Marvel films of late.
No.
And I think that when I walked out of it, I went with my nephew, who's 16. I kind of just dropped him a message like, do you want to go to the cinema? He was like, yeah, I'll pick you up in 10 minutes. So we went along, and we both said the exact same thing when we walked out. It was like, that was much better than I expected it to be. I had a lot more fun than I thought I was going to have. Not that I didn't think it was going to be bad, but I'm so ingrained in this thing of kind of like, it's so kind of churning through everything and not really going anywhere. You have the things of like, oh, we're having more nods to a multiverse, but we're not really dropping it yet, and we're going to touch on it again, and maybe a bit more, and you need to eventually go for it. And at the moment they haven't. Even with something like Multiverse of Madness, they didn't properly go for it. They just took it to a slightly off-kilter version of our own world. But I think it's as a film, like if you look too far into this plot, it all falls apart. Like we were having a conversation on the way home, and the more we talked about it, the less we started to like it, because it does kind of fall apart under its own weight. But as a fluffy, fun, kind of night at the cinema, kind of enjoyable Marvel film of the Infinity Saga, it falls probably the middle ground. It's fun, it's enjoyable, it's popcorn, it's light, it's all the things you like about a Marvel film. Middle ground for the Infinity Saga, for the multiverse, it's towards the top, because the time flew by. It's not a long film. It doesn't outstay its welcome. Kind of some really left field set pieces, which again,
so incredible.
You do sit there at times thinking, what is going on? In the same way that there's a number of Marvel films which are set in space and set in a not Earth-based scenario where they can have fun with it. You think of the Guardians of the Galaxy films, they can have fun with that world, and they can have fun with some of the worlds in kind of the Marvels as well.
I love this.
Dan, would it have been better if I was sat next to you? That's the question.
Well, I mean, I'm not gonna do my nephew bad here. Like, you can sit next to him, all right?
I don't think that's what Sam meant.
He listens to the podcast. I'm not going to sit here saying, "Oh, I don't want to go with him." We had a great time.
Does he qualify for the children's menu at the cinema that you go to?
No, actually, he doesn't qualify for the children's menu. He's 16. He had a Tango Ice Blast.
Oh, good lord!
Which apparently is all the rage. I've never had one. I tried it and it was like, it's like a slush puppy with about 6 different fizzy flavors. I was like, no, thank you.
Do you know in Denmark they put caramel over it?
And then a pork loin on top.
Oh yeah, ooh, some onions. Now I love this film. This is for my money. This is my favourite Marvel film of the year, hands down. As you're absolutely right, Dan. I haven't had a fun with a Marvel film probably since Spider-Man No Way Home.
Yeah, and that was more of an event than it was an actual good film.
And that was 2021. I found Guardians 3. I love the Guardians films, but I wasn't in the mood. It was so bleak, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Yes, there's hope in it, but it was a bit too dark and bleak for me, and I'll probably never watch it again. It's just not the headspace. It's not what I want to read and see at the moment. Likewise, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania was just... I mean, I love to say that, you know, as a man who's turning 38 tomorrow, I've got to appreciate the fact that these films aren't just for white men in their late 30s. But even so, I did feel that was quite a difficult film to watch, that film. It just was all over the place. But what does work, and actually one of the reasons why I love to have sat next to you in the cinema, Sam, is there's a needle drop in the Marvels that's it's a Marmite needle drop. I loved it. I'd be quite curious to know what you'd make of it.
Okay.
And it is slightly audacious. There's some lovely kind of audacious moments in this, which I'm not going to go into. But broadly speaking, the premise is this, that the 3 Marvels, so this is Captain Marvel, played by the fantastic Brie Larson, Teyonah Parris, who from WandaVision, and Miss Marvel, played by Man Villani, are entangled. So what happens is that if one of them uses their powers, they all swap places with each other.
Great concept.
It's a fantastic concept, and it means that... And I think, like, so far for me, some of the best fight sequences have been in Shang-Chi, and that still holds up, because I'm a big fan of that type of, dare I say, very stylized martial arts in cinema, that fighting.
But something that's physical and tangible. And
and it just works.
Not just flying around.
Yeah, in the same way that I love the prequel lightsaber battles in Star Wars. I'm sorry, I love the prequel ones. Those are my favourites. This one has a fight scene that is so slick. Like, the music's great. Nia DaCosta's amazing filmmaker in terms of just, there's a vibrancy, a kineticism. It feels like almost how, like, you know, there's kind of echoes there of Miss Marvel. And I think, Dan, you're absolutely right. Man Villani is the heart of this. Yeah. And that just is infectious. I don't think any other director could pull it off in the same kind of way. So the fight scene, Sam's great, because to start off with, they're fighting, you know, one of them forgets and uses their powers, and suddenly Miss Marvel's in space, and she's like, what do I do here? And it kind of comes across in the trailers. And then watching these 3 people, one of which is the auntie of the other, and that auntie is also the role model of the young Miss Marvel, is just gorgeous. The 3 of them, it's just gorgeous. And learning to actually turn that weakness, this glitch that they're entangled with each other, into a strength is so cool to watch. It really is really quite cool to watch. But this is a breath of fresh air.
Yes.
I want my comic book films to be fun, colourful, with heart. And people have said this is like a CW show, and they've used that as an insult. Was actually, I think that's a strength, because Greg Berlanti, the reason why he's so good at making these shows is he has those 3 principles. I think it's heart. I can't remember what they are, but, you know, the heart of those, having at its core, it's about good heart. Having a, you know, it has this. And if you think about it, the reason why some of those earlier Marvel films worked really, really well was because they were allowed to actually expose their hearts. You know? Proof that Tony Stark has a heart, for example. And the first Iron Man is literally, he is like how the Tin Man gets his heart in The Wizard of Oz. And this is just, there's so much love in this film. And out of all the films I've watched this year for Marvel, this is the one I want to rewatch the most.
Let's talk briefly about war.
Huh?
Okay.
What is it good for?
Thanks, Dan. Come on, Kris.
Absolutely nothing.
You're just not on the ball today, are you? Come on. Actually, I don't think we've ever talked about it on the podcast. I think we mentioned it, Warboys, but we've never really mentioned what it is. We might as well just talk about it again. But there is an occasion where, and Kris and I have done this for the last 8 years. No, 7.
No, I think it is 8.
Is it 8? Let me just check. Let me check the calendar. But for the last however many years, Kris and I have always made a point of getting together around the sort of summertime, to get together and put aside a day to just play war games, and we called it Warboys. This year was our 7th year of just getting together and playing just war games. And we have a sort of a compendium, a collection of games that sort of come out every year. Memoir 44, V Commandos, Polis we played 1 year, and Undaunted, one of the Undaunted games.
Hogs of War.
Hogs of War has now become a recent entry into the Warboys canon. But we did get to play a new game this most recent Warboys day, which we have hinted at, and we've put pictures up on our Instagram feed of. But it's a brand new game actually from the designers of Undaunted, Trevor Benjamin, David Thompson, and for some strange reason they've marketed it as the first worker placement 2-player war game, or the first worker placement war game, which seems to me like a strange thing to brag about. But anyway, it's called General Orders World War II. And this is a bit like Undaunted. It's a strictly 2-player experience. Comes in a much smaller box. It's a very, very dinky game to get out. Just a small map that you fold out on the table between the two of you. Some little wooden pieces to hold and to move around the board, some cards to play at random times during the game. But generally, it's a game about using commander tokens, little commander figurines, putting them on the board, doing the associated action with that commander, and then when the game ends, whoever has control with their troops over certain pieces in the middle of the board wins the game. Or you can end the game a bit sooner if you're able to gain control of the other person's base or HQ. And I think there's... What do I want to say about this game? I think I want to say that for a war game, and with this much pedigree behind it, for any game with this much pedigree behind it, as the designers do have, I think it definitely really makes a good representation of that level of design on the table. It is a very good game to play. It's very slight. It goes very, very fast. If games about a slow ramp up in tension and a rise to a particular denouement is your kind of thing, then I think a game like this, General Orders World War II, is exceptional in its design. I don't think I played a game recently where it really feels like the tension manages to slowly build so consistently throughout the game until you very much get to a bit where you're doing nothing but clashing between components. In the early stages of the game, there's a bit of toing and froing, a bit of like just dipping your toes into the water, maybe having a few battles, but not really getting too involved, just doing some things to build up your squads, and before going out into the middle of the board where there's a lot more points and sort of scoring opportunities on offer. And then suddenly by the end of the game, it's just all clashing, all vying for points, and all just reaching a crescendo, which I think in any board game is a particularly difficult move to pull off, and for it to happen consistently over several games. And General Orders World War II pulls that off in spades. And yeah, I think I don't know what you think about it, Kris, but I feel like it's just one of those games that, in the midst of other games of its ilk, other war games specifically, feels very refreshing to play. and feels very different and very doesn't feel cumbersome or dragged down by its particular theming, shall we say.
Well, I think for me, it's a tight game, you're right. Play time is about 30 minutes.
Yep.
And as a consequence, the board is quite small and tight as a consequence. But in instances, it feels like a nice little tug of war between the two of us. And it's largely abstract in places. You'll be using wooden discs. Yes, there's like wooden pieces of airplanes, but the bulk of the kind of components you're working with are wooden discs in your respective colour. But what offsets that is the incredible art from Alex Green, which really does pop on the table. And also, one thing I really do appreciate is, yes, the board is small, but the cards aren't. The cards are a standard size card with that art taking up half of it. So even though on the board, yes, these are wooden discs, the imagery on the cards, which is beautiful again from Alex Green, in addition to that text, stops it feeling almost like an elaborate version of chess, say, for example. But equally also, it's not so much dripping with theme that you're kind of annoyed when it ends very soon after 30 minutes. Oh, you've done it already? Oh, okay, sorry. We can play this on my kitchen table. I have quite a small kitchen table at the moment because I'm currently doing up my kitchen. And to have a war game, which feels like a war game, that will fit amply on my kitchen table is a wonderful thing, really. Yes, I know we've spoken about similar war game titles, perhaps like Air, Land and Sea or Blitzkrieg, for example, which we enjoyed very much at the time. But they're not part of our circulation anymore in terms of warboys. For whatever reason, I think just having an actual board there with cards is very useful in terms of just making it feel like an event.
Yeah,
to a degree in this context. I also think I don't have the analysis paralysis. It's like it's asking a little bit more of me than say Air, Land and Sea. But unlike Blitzkrieg, there is a kind of a landscape that I'm moving across. So it becomes that interesting spatial puzzle as well as a worker placement game, which I really do appreciate. So this feels like a very, very well-tested Swiss watch-upper game that I could imagine in the future where, like, if we can't devote a whole day to Warboys, an afternoon, we can quickly set this up and tear it down and feel like we've had a...
That future will never happen, Kris.
Of course it won't.
On my word.
No.
It's always a full day or 2 evenings or an evening and a morning spread over 2 days.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dedicate.
I've never partaken in Warboys, and I've never really played any kind of war games. I think the closest I've come to a war game would be something like Escape from Colditz, which is not really a war game.
You're another fighter,
but it's set in the war. And I've always kind of looked at those kind of styles of games as being so expansive, and the kind of game you take hours for, and you spread out on a big table. I know you play stuff like War of the Ring in the past and those kind of things. These big games, you take a long time to do it. And so what I kind of wonder is, obviously, you guys have dedicated a day every year to these types of games. So you clearly love these games, and the concept and the ideas around them is this kind of tactical, take your time, movement, placing, all this different stuff over a long period of time. What is it about this short, condensed version that is kind of bridging that gap? Kind of how is it managing to accomplish the feelings that the bigger games are giving you, but without actually the kind of the space to breathe that those games have?
Interesting. I think it is one of the what you're mentioning and what you're talking about. I think is probably one of my favorite things about the game, but also the thing about the game which kind of I would have a critique about at the same time. I think that the reason why it still feels like our war game is that you definitely feel like a general pushing around wooden pieces on a map to try and game an episode of war. And you definitely get that feeling of sort of taking that step back, and the front cover of the game has, a picture of a general looking over a mountain range with binoculars, and you definitely get that feeling of, you are sitting back, you are looking at a war scene from a distance. Compare that to something like Undaunted or something like V Commandos, where you are, in the thick of it. You are the boots on the ground. You are moving individual pieces and making decisions in the moment, but from a individual or sort of personal perspective. That's where the two sides of the coin sort of come from. But for me, that's the thing that I don't like about General Orders. Sometimes it's just that feeling that starts to creep up and bubble inside me sometimes, is that it feels a little bit too abstract sometimes, especially around something like World War II and something around particularly those two world wars, when people like generals and people in positions of power were much criticized by the fact that they stood back, they were watching things from afar and just pushed people into sort of the abyss and to their doom. And I think that compared to something like Memoir 44, which has a similar sort of style of approach, where in Memoir 44 you take on the role of a general and you order specific pieces around the board. I think the difference there is you actually have the pieces on the board. You have the tanks, you have the infantry, you have the soldiers that you can see being removed when they get shot and killed. And in General Orders, it's just a circular disc that you just take off the board. So I think that you're right in the reason why it still feels like a war game and still fits into Warboys is because it feels like something that genuinely would happen around this kind of war. But I think what I'm most looking forward to, and I predict probably will happen, is the fact that this game is General Orders : World War II. And I think that in the not too distant future, we're going to get something of this ilk that has a different theme. And I think that if they move away from the particular world wars, that this game will, as a series, will suddenly go up in my estimations. I think, not that it's particularly down at the moment, I just think there's just a part of me that feels a little bit uncomfortable sometimes with war games of this particular style.
And we've spoken about this before, Sam, because actually, like, I know we've spoken in the past that, like, having some misgivings. I think it's in Memoir 44, which was, I don't know if that's official or informally dubbed the official board game of World War II, of the D-Day landings. Like, for me, what I'm drawn to in terms of war games is it's the kind of theatre of it, really, in a very, and what I mean by that is the sense that obviously war is the quickest and laziest way to get to conflict, and conflict is where drama is bred, essentially, and like there's no nuance in that, really. Not to say there can't be, and I think some of the best war games are the ones which actually, as you say, Sam, allow you to pause for thought and critique, and to kind of think about the individuals within it, a la Undaunted, which is, as you said, the designers have done, where you're not just getting rid of a card, there's a name on that card.
Yep.
And because of your mistake, they're gone now.
Yeah.
And they're not coming back. And I'd be quite curious to know if that came up in discussions, whether they wanted to try and emulate something like that in General Orders, or whether they felt that actually for a 30-minute game, that might not be something they could do. I don't know.
I mean, technically chess is a war game.
Yeah, I know.
mean, in the same way that General Orders is that you're two competing people in an abstract setting, and it's all about area control, and it's all about getting pieces off the table. So I think that if you sort of really extrapolate it from that, and maybe I'm overthinking it to a certain degree in terms of that uncomfortable feeling I have when I play it from time to time, considering there's games like chess or whatever which, historically have sort of played off that theme of war, of two sides battling against each other. But I think that what General Orders is doing specifically, I think it's trying to play a bit in that space of not necessarily creating a war game. I think it's just creating a new abstract 2-player, experience, and just war happens to be the theme. I don't know, I may be, again, reading too much into it, but it's a bit like, why do we always have a gun in computer games? Why is always the first instinct is that we have to shoot things in order to move through levels in quite a lot of video games? It's just because it's kind of easy. It's a shorthand. It makes sense. It's just the done thing. And I think that as well as the Undaunted series, which I think has just got better and better with each theme and each way that they've moved it forwards, I think General Orders will probably get better and better, because I think that it is just a really, really tight game and a really, really interesting experience and a really, really interesting abstract 2-player experience. But for me now, that theme is something that hopefully has the potential just to get better and better. Would you like to play a game?
Yes, thank you. Yes, Mr. Robot.
Have you been working on that impression?
Well, if you can tell me what that impression's from, then you'll win the game.
Is it War Games?
Yeah, well done, Dan. Well done. You win the game.
Hey.
I thought this would be a fun way to end the show. If we played a game.
Okay.
So I got sent this in the post today from our friends at Big Potato, and I must say this is the strangest game that they've ever sent me. Okay,
and that's saying something, considering they've released a game which is a rubber chicken and a rubber hot dog.
Yeah. So they sent me the world's smallest box of Tic Tacs. Can you see that? I don't know what sort of size comparison that is.
It's probably the size of your thumb.
Probably the size of my thumb. Sounds like this. And then they sent me this as well. Do you know what this is? You know what this is?
You're holding it. Oh, it makes a sound.
Oh, is it like a moo sound?
Yeah. This is the sound. Okay.
There you go.
So this is their game, right?
Is that all they send you and say, we're running out of ideas, can you just make something out of this?
This is a game called Mince or Mince. Okay? So Mince as in Tic Tacs, or Mince as in cow or sheep or whatever that is. Right. So what I want you two to do is I want you to either say Mince or Mince, and I've got to guess which one I think is which, and I want to see how many I can get in a row.
Okay.
How many are we doing each, Sam?
Well, it depends until I get one wrong.
Okay.
This could either be a fantastic game or a terrible game.
So I'm going to close my eyes.
In terms of the podcast.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's rubbish for the podcast, but it's fun.
Yeah.
So I'll close my eyes. I just want one of you to either say Mince or Mince, and I'll have to try. I'm going to try and guess which one was which. Okay. All right.
Crackers, you can go first.
Okay. Mince. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Mince. No, it wasn't.
No?
Really? That's what I heard.
Oh my God. Right. Let's do it again.
See, in my head, that was very clear. There was a very clear T in that.
That's very clear T. All right. Okay. Let's see if I can get more than one. Okay. It's great for the listener. Play along at home. Right.
Mince. Correct.
Mince.
No. Oh, damn.
If only the listener could have just see how poised you are, Sam.
You really debated then. It's more of a case of like a thought process of like, okay, what's Dan trying to do here? Is he trying?
Right. Okay.
Is he trying to give me the hard one?
This is like Horse or Laminator from Taskmaster.
Right. Let's do it one last time. But Dan, you start. Okay. I think that's where I'm going wrong. Okay.
Mince. Yes.
Right, okay.
Mince. No.
Oh!
I knew that was minty fresh.
Why can everyone else hear it except for me? So this is this is an app you can download from Big Potato. You don't have to get the physical version, which I don't think is actually retail. I think this is a nice thing that we were sent. So thanks very much. This now lives at my house. But you can just download it as an app, and I think it's utterly stupid. And but on a long car ride or something like that, I can see it having quite a bit of application.
I don't know kind of the process that the folks at Big Potato Games go through when they're kind of workshopping ideas behind games. But I like to think that this kind of game was them sat around like on sofas, and then one of them just made a comment about the fact that Mince and Mince sound the same. One person started laughing. They started trying to play the game. Everyone started laughing. They went, all right, here's a game.
Inspired by Mince or Mince, I was wondering if there are other homonyms out there that would make also a good game. So 2 words that sound the same but spelt differently and have different meanings. So what's another equivalent of mince or mince?
Bar and bar.
What, as in like, or
like bar? Yeah.
drink bar,
or a drink, yeah, or maybe like a bar, like a clanging bar kind of thing. So something that you can have a sign
imagine
for.
if Big Potato, if you had to sign for an order, Big Potato sent you a crowbar in the post, Sam. And
I'm glad I'm not paying postage. You could have night or night.
Oh,
see, that's
a good one.
That's a good one. But I feel like what Mince and Mince has got is that they're, I don't know why, but they're funny words to say. Like, it just makes me laugh.
I think what's also quite funny is the fact of there is the slightest difference. Like when you're saying it, you hear the difference.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, like night and night is the same sound, but Mince with a T and Mince with a C, there is the tiniest difference that you as the person saying it knows.
If you've got any suggestions for the people at Big Potato who are far cleverer than us, then I'm sure they're happy to hear them. I'm sure.
Oh my gosh, if we've still got a listener at this stage, it's a real shame because we've just made it easier for you, listener, to actually access all the things connected with us in one handy place on our Instagram, which I think is fair to say is probably one of the only social media feeds at the moment that is not problematic as much. So if you go to our Staying In podcast page on Instagram, you can find our pal Peter has put a little link tree in there, which takes you to places such as how you can listen to our podcast. Our Instagram is also on there if you just want to go back to it. Our page on Board Game Geek is on there, where you'll find General Orders, as well as Davy Jones Locker, the Kraken Wakes. Our Steam Curator page is on there. We've not spoken about video games this episode, but all the ones we have spoken about are on there. And also, blowing my own trumpet here, our special playlists on Spotify are there as well, which traditionally are quite tricky to get hold of. But everything we talk about that has music connected to it, so there'll be something from the Marvels on there, will be in its own respective playlist. And that is depending on what kind of mood you're in, really. The Chamomile one seems to be the most popular one at the moment, which is for more of a kind of chilled vibes. If you had a really tough day at work and you just want to vent, I suggest Strong Brew. A much more caffeinated playlist.
Yeah, and if you go to Instagram, you can actually see photos of quite a lot of the stuff we've spoken about recently. So you can see pictures of Monster 12, Fly Home, which Kris, you spoke about on the last episode. You can see pictures of me playing from a game session I ran of Critical Sanctuary, some pictures of Jockmock, pictures from mine and Kris's Warboys. That's got pictures of Memoir 44, Hogs of War, and the aforementioned General Orders. And you can also see pictures of our Twilight Imperium session, quite a few pictures of what it was like for us to play Twilight Imperium as well. So there's tons of stuff on there if you're interested to see a bit more about what we get up to. when we're not recording this. And if you do have a suggestion, if there's something you think we should add to one of those lists, the curator pages or the Spotify playlist, and do just let us know, stayinginpod@gmail.com, or just send us a DM. We've been getting some lovely DMs, haven't we, Kris?
Yeah. Yes.
On Instagram.
I would love to do a little shout out, if I may.
Please do.
Thank you. How the hell do you get into your emails on this? Oh, yes, I've got them here. So I'd like to do a big shout out to Ben, who said that they really enjoyed the recommendation of Batman the Audio Adventures, which you can get on a podcast. We spoke about that on an episode. He recommended us a podcast to listen to, a radio drama on Audible called Impact Winter. So that's one for Pete, who lives constantly on his Audible account. And yeah, they said some very nice words. They're very happy to hear that Peter Willington Investigates is back. And currently, that's why Pete's not here today. He's currently off investigating, checking if any of the games in his house are actually authentic.
Anyway, that's it for now. I think there's only one less thing to say. Go on.
Is it Mince or is it Mince?
Mince. No, Sam.
No. All right then.